The classified hangar at Edwards Air Force Base stood silent in the pre-dawn darkness, its massive steel doors sealed against the desert wind. Inside, a shape unlike any aircraft in history waited beneath protective covers, angular, impossibly flat, built from materials that bent light and sound to their will. For 15 years, only a select few had been deemed worthy to pilot this ghost of American engineering. All of them are men. All of them until today. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Captain Elena Rodriguez had been told she wasn't Air Force material when she first applied to flight school. Too emotional, they said. Lacks the killer instinct. Not built for the pressures of modern warfare. She'd been rejected twice before finally earning her wings through sheer persistence. Now, as she stood alone in the observation deck overlooking the stealth bomber's resting place, those same voices seemed to echo from the shadows. The difference was, this time, she held the keys to the most advanced aircraft ever built. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly beyond the chain-link perimeter of Nellis Air Force Base, its surface rippling with heat waves that made the distant mountains dance like mirages. The morning sun had barely crested the eastern ridges when Elena Rodriguez pulled her weathered Honda Civic into the enlisted parking area, the engine ticking as it cooled in the dry air. She sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, watching the stream of officers in crisp uniforms stride past toward the administrative complex. Elena's flight suit was regulation, but it fit differently than those around her. The shoulders were tailored narrower, the waist taken in at a shop off base that specialized in alterations for the handful of women on station. Her name tape read Rodriguez in standard block letters, but unlike the men walking past, there was no swagger in her step, no casual confidence born from belonging to an exclusive club. She moved with precision, each step measured, each gesture economical. The briefing room for the 427th Test Squadron occupied the second floor of Building 1203, its windows facing west toward the classified flight line where shapes moved beneath camouflage netting. Elena had been assigned to the squadron for 8 months now, but her desk remained positioned at the far end of the room, separated from the main cluster by a bank of filing cabinets and outdated computer terminals. It wasn't official segregation, nothing that would appear in any regulation or manual, but the message was clear enough. She arrived 20 minutes before the morning briefing, as she always did, and began her routine check of weather data and flight restrictions. The computer screen cast a pale blue glow across her face as she scrolled through atmospheric conditions, wind patterns, and restricted airspace notifications. Her notebook lay open beside the keyboard, pages filled with her own shorthand annotations about pressure systems and visibility forecasts. The handwriting was precise, each letter formed with the care of someone who had learned early that details mattered. Major William Kruger entered the briefing room with the easy confidence of a man who had never doubted his place in the world. His flight suit bore the patches of 3 different fighter squadrons, each one a testament to his progression through the ranks of Air Force aviation. He moved through the room like he owned it, which, in many ways, he did. As the squadron's operations officer, his approval was required for every flight plan, every training mission, every request for aircraft time. "Morning, Rodriguez," he said, not looking up from the duty roster he was reviewing. "You're on weather observation again today. Tower duty from 0800 to 1600. Elena nodded without looking away from her screen. Weather observation was the military equivalent of being assigned to watch paint dry monitoring atmospheric conditions from a glass-walled tower while real pilots flew real missions. It was necessary work, but it wasn't flying. It was the kind of assignment given to people who needed to be kept busy but not trusted with anything important. "Understood, sir," she replied, her voice steady and professional. The rest of the squadron filtered in over the next 15 minutes, their conversations a blend of technical jargon and casual banter. They discussed upcoming training exercises, compared notes on aircraft performance, and shared stories from previous assignments. Alina listened without participating, filing away information about flight schedules and mission parameters. She had learned that staying quiet meant staying invisible, and staying invisible meant avoiding the kind of attention that could derail a career. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chun occupied the chair directly behind Elena, but their proximity was one of geography rather than camaraderie. Colonel Chun was one of only 3 women in the squadron, and she had earned her position through a combination of exceptional skill and carefully managed relationships. She flew transport missions and reconnaissance flights, assignments that were crucial but fell outside the glamorous world of fighter aviation. When she spoke, it was with the measured tone of someone who had learned to choose her words carefully. The new test program is ramping up, Colonel Chun mentioned during a brief lull in conversation. They're looking for additional pilots with specific qualifications. Elena's fingers paused over her keyboard for just a moment. Test programs at Nellis were where careers were made or broken. They were also where the most advanced aircraft in the American inventory were put through their paces, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in military aviation. But test programs required recommendations, and recommendations required relationships that Elena had never been able to cultivate. Captain Jake Morrison leaned back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head. His flight suit was adorned with patches from his time with the Thunderbirds, the Air Force's elite demonstration squadron. Everything about his posture suggested a man who had never met a challenge he couldn't overcome. "Heard they're looking for people with experience in low observable aircraft," he said, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You know, pilots who understand the nuances of stealth operations." The comment was directed at the room in general, but Elena caught the sideways glance in her direction. She had logged more hours in the F-117 Nighthawk than anyone else in the squadron, but those flights had been training missions and routine patrols. Nothing that would appear on the kind of performance reviews that opened doors to advanced programs. Elena's computer chimed softly, indicating an update to the day's weather briefing. She opened the file and began transcribing the relevant information onto her duty sheet. High-pressure system moving in from the west. Visibility unlimited. Winds light and variable. Perfect flying weather for those who would actually be flying. The briefing officially began at 0730, with Major Kruger standing at the front of the room beside a large display screen. The day's schedule appeared in neat rows of text: training flights, maintenance check rides, and routine patrols. Elena's name appeared once, listed under support personnel, with her tower assignment clearly marked. "Today's focus is on advanced maneuvering techniques," Kruger announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "We'll be working on high G turns and evasive maneuvers in the F-16 and F-15 platforms. Weather conditions are ideal, so we'll be pushing the envelope on performance parameters." Elena made notes about the training objectives, cross-referencing them with her weather data to identify potential areas where atmospheric conditions might affect aircraft performance. It was the kind of analysis that could prove valuable to the pilots actually flying the missions, but her insights would remain locked in her personal notebook rather than shared with the group. The assignments were distributed with military efficiency. Morrison would lead a 4-ship formation through tactical maneuvering exercises, while Colonel Chun would conduct a reconnaissance mission over the northern ranges. 3 other pilots were assigned to air-to-air combat training. Their aircraft, configured with sensors and cameras to record their performance for later analysis. Elena gathered her materials and prepared to head to the weather tower, the glass-walled structure stood at the edge of the flight line, offering a panoramic view of the airfield and the surrounding desert. It was equipped with sophisticated meteorological instruments and communication equipment, but its primary function was to provide human oversight of weather conditions that could affect flight operations. As she walked across the tarmac, Elena passed rows of aircraft in various stages of preparation. Ground crews swarmed over the fighters, checking systems and loading practice munitions. The sound of jet engines beginning their startup sequence echoed across the concrete, a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the soles of her boots. The weather tower was empty when she arrived, its previous occupant having left behind only a half-empty coffee cup and a logbook with routine entries. Elena settled into the chair facing the flight line and began her methodical review of the morning's conditions. The instruments showed what she already knew from her earlier analysis: perfect flying weather with unlimited visibility and calm winds. Through the tower's windows, she watched the first wave of aircraft taxi toward the runway. The pilots moved with practiced efficiency, their pre-flight checks completed with the muscle memory of thousands of hours of training. Elena knew those procedures by heart, had performed them countless times in her own aircraft. But today, like most days, she would observe rather than participate. The tower's radio crackled to life with the familiar cadence of air traffic control communications. Aircraft call signs, runway assignments, and clearance instructions filled the air with a steady stream of professional jargon. Elena monitored the frequencies, ready to provide weather updates if conditions changed, but knowing that the clear skies would likely hold throughout the day. As the morning progressed, Elena documented wind shifts, temperature changes, and visibility conditions with the thoroughness of someone who understood that small details could have large consequences. Her logbook filled with precise measurements and careful observations, creating a record that would be archived and forgotten. It was important work, but it wasn't flying. At 11:30 hours, Elena noticed a change in the pattern of aircraft movements on the flight line. A convoy of unmarked vehicles had appeared near the far end of the runway, their occupants dressed in civilian clothes despite their obvious military bearing. Security personnel had cordoned off a section of the tarmac, creating a buffer zone around what appeared to be an empty patch of concrete. Elena adjusted her binoculars and focused on the activity below. The vehicles were positioned in a precise formation, their occupants scanning the sky with the alertness of people expecting something important. This wasn't routine training or standard operations. This was something else entirely: the radio. Frequencies remained silent about the unusual activity, but Elena's trained eye could read the signs. The security posture, the civilian oversight, the careful positioning of personnel, all of it suggested the presence of classified aircraft or equipment. She made a brief note in her logbook about the increased security activity, but without official notification, there was little else she could do. As the day wore on, Elena continued her weather observations while keeping one eye on the mysterious activity at the far end of the runway. The regular training flights proceeded on schedule, their pilots executing their assigned maneuvers with varying degrees of success. Elena tracked their progress through her binoculars, noting the subtle differences in technique and skill that separated the exceptional pilots from the merely competent. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At 13:47 hours, her radio crackled with an unexpected transmission. The voice was unfamiliar, using a call sign she didn't recognize. "Weather Tower, this is Phantom 77. Request current conditions for classified operations area." Elena reached for her microphone, her pulse quickening slightly. Classified operations were rare at Nellis, and she had never been directly involved in supporting them. The call sign wasn't in her roster of authorized aircraft, which meant it was either a mistake or something beyond her clearance level. "Phantom 77, this is Weather Tower. Current conditions are clear skies, unlimited visibility, and calm winds. No restrictions for VFR operations. Roger, weather tower, Phantom 77 copies. Maintain discrete frequency for duration of operation. Elena acknowledged the transmission and made a note in her logbook. Discrete frequency meant that whatever was about to happen would be conducted on encrypted communications channels beyond the reach of normal monitoring. She was being asked to stand by, but she wouldn't be privy to the details of what was unfolding. Over the next hour, Elena watched as the mysterious activity on the flight line intensified. More vehicles arrived, their occupants joining the growing crowd of observers. Camera equipment was positioned at strategic locations, and what appeared to be recording devices were connected to the tower's communication systems. Elena found herself at the center of something significant, but entirely in the dark about its purpose. At 1500 hours, 30 minutes before the end of her shift, Elena heard the sound that would change everything. It was unlike any aircraft she had ever encountered, a deep, otherworldly whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She lifted her binoculars and scanned the sky, but saw nothing. The sound grew stronger, more distinct, but there was no visible aircraft anywhere in the vicinity. Elena's training kicked in, and she began documenting everything she could observe. The sound's direction and intensity, the atmospheric conditions, the reaction of personnel on the ground. Her logbook entry would be precise and thorough, even if she didn't understand what she was witnessing. The whisper became a presence, and Elena realized that something was approaching the runway. Something invisible, something that challenged everything she thought she knew about aviation. The security personnel on the ground stood straighter, their attention focused on a point in the sky that Elena couldn't see. And then, for just a moment, the light shifted. The desert sun caught something that shouldn't have been there, a reflection, a distortion in the air, a suggestion of shape where there should have been only empty sky. Elena held her breath, straining to see what her eyes insisted wasn't there. Presence touched down with the whisper of air over metal, and Elena finally understood. She was witnessing the arrival of something that officially didn't exist, an aircraft so advanced, so classified, that even acknowledging its presence would require security clearances she didn't possess. Elena lowered her binoculars and returned to her logbook. Her shift would end in 30 minutes, and she would document the weather conditions with the same precision she had maintained throughout the day. But she would carry with her the knowledge that she had witnessed something extraordinary, something that existed in the shadows of American military aviation. The invisible aircraft had landed, and with it, Elena's understanding of what was possible had fundamentally changed. The officers, Mess at Nellis, operated on unwritten rules that had evolved over decades of military tradition. Tables near the windows were reserved for squadron commanders and senior pilots, their conversations a mixture of strategic planning and casual competition. The middle section belonged to the mainstream fighter pilots, the backbone of the base's operations, while tables along the far wall housed the support staff and newer personnel, still earning their place in the hierarchy. Elena sat at table 14, positioned exactly where someone of her rank and assignment would be expected. Her lunch tray held the same regulation meal as everyone else's, but she ate with the mechanical efficiency of someone whose mind was elsewhere. Around her, conversations flowed in overlapping currents of technical discussion and base gossip. But none of it included her. 3 tables away, Captain Morrison's voice carried above the general din as he recounted his morning's training mission. His hands moved expressively as he described a particularly challenging maneuver, his audience of fellow pilots nodding with the appreciation of professionals recognizing genuine skill. Elena had observed that same flight from her weather tower, noting the precision of Morrison's formation work and the way he had adapted to changing wind conditions without apparent effort. The thing about stealth operations, Morrison was saying, his fork paused halfway to his mouth, is that it's not just about the aircraft, it's about the pilot's mindset. You have to think differently, move differently. Most people just don't. Have that kind of mental flexibility. Lieutenant David Hawkins, a recent transfer from Langley, leaned forward with interest. I've heard the psychological requirements are pretty intense. They say they wash out more people for mental incompatibility than physical limitations. Colonel Chun, sitting 2 chairs away from Morrison, nodded slowly. The screening process is unlike anything else in the Air Force. They're looking for a very specific type of pilot. Someone who can handle isolation, make split-second decisions without backup, and maintain operational security under extreme stress. Elena continued eating, but her attention was fully focused on the conversation. The invisible aircraft she had witnessed the previous day represented exactly the kind of advanced operations they were discussing. Her training in the F-117 had given her some exposure to stealth concepts. But what she had seen went far beyond anything in her experience. Major Kruger approached their section of the mess, his tray laden with the kind of substantial meal that suggested a man comfortable with his place in the world. He settled into the chair beside Morrison, immediately becoming the center of the conversation's gravity. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, nodding toward Colonel Chun. "I trust everyone's recovery from yesterday's exercises was satisfactory. Today's afternoon briefing will cover some new developments in our training curriculum. Anything we should know about in advance, sir?" Morrison asked, his tone suggesting the casual familiarity of professional equals. Kruger glanced around the table, his eyes lingering briefly on each face before responding. "Let's just say that some of our more advanced programs are expanding their scope. There may be opportunities for pilots who demonstrate the right combination of skills and discretion." Elena felt her pulse quicken, but she maintained her focus on her meal. Advanced programs at Nellis meant classified operations, and classified operations meant the kind of flying that could define a career. But opportunities like that required more than just technical competence. They required the kind of internal connections she had never been able to establish. Hawkins sat down, his water glass with the careful precision of someone asking an important question. "Sir, are we talking about the kind of programs that require special clearances? I've heard rumors about some pretty exotic aircraft being tested here." "Rumors," Kruger replied with a slight smile, "are exactly that. What I can tell you is that the Air Force is always looking for pilots who can adapt to new technologies and operational requirements. The future of military aviation belongs to those who can embrace change." Elena's attention was drawn to a conversation at the adjacent table where 2 senior sergeants were discussing base security protocols. Their voices were low, but she caught fragments about increased perimeter patrols and restricted access zones. The timing seemed connected to the previous day's mysterious activity, but without more information, she could only speculate. "Rodriguez seems to have her head in the clouds again," Morrison commented, his voice carrying just enough volume to ensure she would hear. "Probably planning her next weather observation strategy." The comment drew scattered laughter from around the table, the kind of casual mockery that stung precisely because it contained an element of truth. Elena was indeed thinking about atmospheric conditions, but not in the way Morrison assumed. She was analyzing the relationship between air density, temperature gradients, and the visibility of low observable aircraft. Colonel Chun shifted uncomfortably, her expression suggesting disapproval of Morrison's comment. "Weather observation is crucial for flight safety," she said quietly. "Someone has to monitor conditions that could affect operations." "Of course," Morrison replied, his tone suggesting agreement while his expression conveyed something else entirely. "It's important work. Essential, even. Just not the kind of work that leads to the more exciting opportunities." Elena finished her meal and prepared to leave, but Kruger's voice stopped her. "Rodriguez, a moment." She approached his table with the careful attention of someone accustomed to unexpected scrutiny. Kruger's expression was professional, but unreadable, the kind of neutral mask that could precede either opportunity or reprimand. "Your weather reports have been consistently accurate," he said, his voice carrying across the table. "Command has noticed the quality of your atmospheric analysis, particularly your predictions about temperature inversion effects on aircraft performance." Elena nodded, unsure whether this was praise or prelude to criticism. "Thank you, sir. I try to be thorough in my observations." "Thoroughness is a valuable trait," Kruger continued, "especially in operations where precision matters more than speed. There may be some additional responsibilities coming your way, assignments that require the kind of attention to detail you've demonstrated." The conversation around the table had quieted, everyone listening to an exchange that seemed to carry more weight than its surface content suggested. Elena felt the familiar tension of being the focus of attention without understanding the underlying dynamics. "I'm ready for any assignment, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite her uncertainty. Kruger nodded slowly. "Good. Report to Building 4472 tomorrow at 0600. Ask for Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She'll brief you on some new requirements for weather support in specialized operations." Elena acknowledged the order and left the mess, her mind racing with questions about the unusual assignment. Building 4472 was in the restricted section of the base, an area she had never accessed. Dr. Mitchell wasn't a name she recognized from the usual roster of meteorological personnel. Everything about the instruction suggested involvement in operations beyond routine weather observation. The afternoon briefing took place in the squadron's main conference room, its walls lined with charts and displays showing regional airspace and training areas. Elena arrived early and took her usual seat near the back, but she noticed that the room's configuration had changed. Additional security personnel stood near the entrances, and several unfamiliar faces occupied chairs, typically reserved for visiting dignitaries. Kruger began the briefing with unusual formality, his presentation covering topics that seemed disconnected from the squadron's normal training activities. He discussed advanced navigation techniques, communication protocols for sensitive operations, and psychological preparation for high-stress missions. Elena took careful notes, but the information felt like pieces of a puzzle she wasn't qualified to solve. "The modern battlefield requires pilots who can operate independently," Kruger explained, his pointer indicating a map of contested airspace. "Future operations will place increasing demands on individual judgment and adaptability. Training programs are evolving to reflect these realities." One of the unfamiliar faces, a civilian woman in an expensive suit, stood and addressed the room. "The pilots selected for advanced programs will undergo screening processes that evaluate not just technical skills, but psychological resilience and operational flexibility. We're looking for individuals who can function effectively in isolation." Elena felt a chill of recognition. The woman's description matched everything she had heard about stealth operations, missions where pilots operated alone, beyond the reach of normal support systems, relying entirely on their own judgment and training. Morrison raised his hand. "Ma'am, are we talking about single-seat operations? Missions without wingmen or backup support?" "Among other requirements," the woman replied. "The specific details are classified, but I can say that future aircraft systems will place unprecedented demands on pilot capability. We need individuals who can handle that responsibility." The briefing continued for another hour, covering topics that seemed designed to prepare the squadron for significant changes in their operational focus. Elena documented everything she could, but much of the information was presented in the kind of carefully neutral language that suggested classified content lurking beneath the surface. After the briefing, Elena lingered in the conference room. As the other personnel filed out, she was organizing her notes when Colonel Chun approached, her expression thoughtful. "Rodriguez, walk with me," Chen said, gesturing toward the exit. They walked in silence until they were outside the building, far enough from potential listeners to speak freely. Chun's pace was measured, her attention apparently focused on the distant mountains, but Alina sensed she was being evaluated. "You've been watching the flight line more carefully than usual," Chun observed. "Yesterday afternoon, in particular. Did you notice anything unusual?" Alina chose her words carefully. There was increased security activity near the southern runway, unfamiliar vehicles and personnel. Nothing was announced through normal channels. Chun nodded slowly. "What did you make of it?" "It appeared to be classified operations, ma'am." "Beyond my clearance level." "Good answer," Chun replied. "Shows discretion. That's important in this environment." They continued walking, their path taking them closer to the restricted area where Alina's new assignment would begin. The buildings in this section were newer, more sophisticated, with the kind of security measures that suggested highly sensitive activities. "The Air Force is changing," Chun continued. "New technologies, new operational requirements. There are opportunities for pilots who can adapt, but those opportunities come with risks. Increased responsibility, higher security requirements, and the kind of scrutiny that can make or break a career." Elena sensed that Chun was offering more than general career advice. "I understand, ma'am. I'm prepared for additional challenges. Are you?" Chun stopped walking and faced Elena directly. "Because what I'm about to tell you is off the record, and it stays between us. The assignment you received today, the one in Building 4472, it's not just about weather observation. It's an evaluation. They're looking at pilots who might be suitable for programs that don't officially exist." Elena felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her expression neutral. "What kind of programs, ma'am?" "The kind where failure isn't just career-ending, it's potentially dangerous. The kind where success means becoming invisible, even to your fellow pilots. You need to understand what you're walking into." The warning was clear, but so was the opportunity. Elena had spent her entire career on the periphery of military aviation, watching others receive the assignments and recognition she had been denied. Now, for the first time, she was being offered a chance to move beyond observation into participation. "I appreciate the warning, Colonel," Elena said, "but I'd like the opportunity to prove myself." Chun studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Just remember, in this business, proving yourself once isn't enough. You have to prove yourself every day, and you have to do it while maintaining the kind of discretion that makes you invisible. It's not an easy balance." As they walked back toward the main complex, Elena reflected on the day's events. The mysterious assignment, the unusual briefing, Chun's cryptic warning, all of it pointed toward involvement in operations far beyond anything she had previously imagined. She was being offered a chance to step out of the shadows, but only by embracing a different kind of invisibility. The sun was setting behind the western mountains as Elena returned to her quarters, its light casting long shadows across the base. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new uncertainties, but also the possibility of finally demonstrating the capabilities she had spent years developing in isolation. She had been overlooked and dismissed, relegated to support roles and routine assignments, but she had never stopped preparing for something more. Elena spent the evening reviewing everything she knew about stealth operations and classified aircraft, preparing for whatever evaluation awaited her in Building 4472. She understood that this was her opportunity, perhaps her only opportunity, to prove that her careful, methodical approach was exactly what advanced operations required. The culture of dismissal that had defined her career was about to be challenged, and she intended to be ready. Building 4472 stood like a fortress in the restricted section of Nellis, its windowless walls rising from the desert floor with the stark functionality of a structure designed to keep secrets. Elena arrived at 0558, 2 minutes ahead of schedule, and stood before the unmarked entrance while security cameras tracked her movement with mechanical precision. The building showed no external signs of its purpose, no unit designations, no mission statements. Only a simple numerical identifier and a card reader that glowed red in the pre-dawn darkness. At exactly 0600, the reader chirped once and flashed green. Elena inserted her ID card and pressed her thumb to the biometric scanner, feeling the slight vibration as the system verified her identity against databases she didn't know existed. The heavy door clicked open, revealing a corridor that seemed to extend far deeper into the building than its external dimensions suggested. Dr. Sarah Mitchell waited in the reception area, her appearance as precisely controlled as everything else in the facility. She wore civilian clothes, a crisp white blouse and dark slacks, but carried herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to military environments. Her handshake was firm, her eye contact direct, and her smile suggested professional competence rather than warmth. "Captain Rodriguez," Dr. Mitchell said, consulting a tablet computer. "Welcome to the Advanced Atmospheric Research Division. I trust your security briefing was thorough?" Elena nodded, though she had received no security briefing beyond the standard protocols for classified facilities. "Yes, ma'am. I'm ready to begin whatever assignment you have for me." Dr. Mitchell's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a flicker of evaluation that suggested Elena's response had been noted and filed away for future reference. "Excellent. Follow me, and we'll begin with an orientation to your new responsibilities." The corridor beyond the reception area was lined with doors bearing cryptic alphanumeric designations: AR7, TM12, SL3. Elena caught glimpses of laboratories and computer terminals through small windows, but the view was always partial, deliberately obscured. The facility hummed with the sound of sophisticated equipment, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to resonate through the walls and floor. "Your background in meteorological observation makes you uniquely qualified for this assignment," Dr. Mitchell explained as they walked. "We're developing new techniques for atmospheric analysis that go beyond traditional weather forecasting. The applications are ... specialized." They stopped at a door marked AR-15, and Dr. Mitchell pressed her palm to another biometric scanner. The room beyond was larger than Elena had expected, filled with computer workstations and displays showing complex atmospheric models. Three-dimensional projections rotated slowly in the air above various terminals, their colors shifting to represent temperature, pressure, and humidity variations. "This is where you'll be working," Dr. Mitchell said, gesturing toward a workstation equipped with multiple monitors and input devices Elena didn't recognize. "Your task is to develop predictive models for atmospheric conditions that affect low observable aircraft operations." Elena felt her pulse quicken. Low observable aircraft meant stealth technology, and stealth technology meant the kind of advanced operations she had only dreamed of participating in. But she maintained her professional composure, nodding as if such assignments were routine. "What specific atmospheric factors are most critical for these operations?" she asked. Dr. Mitchell activated one of the displays, showing a complex chart of atmospheric layers and their properties. "Traditional weather forecasting focuses on conditions that affect conventional aircraft visibility, wind speed, precipitation. Our requirements are more sophisticated. We need to understand how atmospheric conditions interact with electromagnetic signatures, thermal emissions, and acoustic propagation." Elena studied the display, her mind immediately beginning to process the implications. Stealth aircraft relied on more than just radar-absorbing materials and angular designs. They needed atmospheric conditions that would help them remain undetected. And that meant understanding weather patterns in ways no meteorologist had ever considered. "For example," Dr. Mitchell continued, highlighting a section of the chart, "temperature inversions can create acoustic shadows that help mask engine noise. Humidity levels affect radar propagation. Even something as subtle as atmospheric pressure can influence how electromagnetic energy behaves around an aircraft. Elena began to understand the scope of what she was being asked to do. This wasn't weather observation. It was the development of an entirely new science that combined atmospheric physics with stealth technology. The work would require not just meteorological knowledge, but an understanding of how air itself could be used as a tool for concealment. Dr. Mitchell, Elena said carefully, this kind of analysis would require access to performance data from actual low observable aircraft. How will I know if my models are accurate? Dr. Mitchell's smile became more genuine, suggesting approval of Elena's question. An excellent point, Captain. You'll be working with flight test data from various platforms. Some of the information is historical, but much of it is current. You'll be analyzing atmospheric conditions during actual stealth operations. Elena felt a chill of excitement mixed with apprehension. She was being offered access to some of the most classified information in the Air Force, data that would allow her to understand how stealth aircraft actually performed under real-world conditions. It was an opportunity beyond anything she had imagined, but it also represented a level of responsibility that could destroy her career if she made a mistake. Dr. Mitchell led Elena to her assigned workstation and began explaining the computer systems. The interface was unlike anything Elena had encountered, sophisticated enough to model atmospheric conditions with extraordinary precision, but intuitive enough that she could begin using it immediately. The displays showed real-time weather data from monitoring stations across the western United States, but also information from sources Elena couldn't identify. Your security clearance has been temporarily elevated for this assignment, Dr. Mitchell explained. The data you'll be working with is compartmentalized. You'll see only what's necessary for your specific tasks. But what you do see must never be discussed outside this facility. Elena spent the morning learning the computer systems and reviewing sample atmospheric models. The work was fascinating, requiring her to think about weather patterns in completely new ways. Instead of predicting whether conditions would be suitable for flying, she needed to determine whether they would be suitable for flying ISIBL by noon. Elena was beginning to understand the complexity of what stealth operations required. Every flight had to be planned around atmospheric conditions that would minimize the aircraft's detectability. Temperature gradients had to be analyzed for their effect on infrared signatures. Humidity levels needed to be calculated for their impact on radar absorption. Even wind patterns had to be evaluated for their influence on acoustic propagation. Dr. Mitchell returned after lunch with a manila folder containing Elena's first real assignment. I want you to analyze atmospheric conditions over Area 51 for the past 6 months, she said, placing the folder on Elena's desk. Look for patterns. That might explain variations in detection ranges for low observable aircraft. Elena opened the folder and found herself looking at flight data that officially didn't exist. Test flights of aircraft with designations she had never heard of. Performance reports that analyze stealth effectiveness under various atmospheric conditions. And electromagnetic signature measurements that revealed exactly how invisible America's most advanced aircraft really were. For the next 6 hours, Elena immersed herself in data that redefined her understanding of military aviation. She analyzed temperature inversions over the Nevada desert, correlated humidity patterns with radar detection ranges, and developed models that could predict optimal atmospheric conditions for stealth operations with unprecedented accuracy. Work required every bit of meteorological knowledge she had accumulated over her career, but it also demanded new ways of thinking about the relationship between air and aircraft. Elena found herself developing theories about atmospheric stealth, the idea that certain weather conditions could make any aircraft more difficult to detect, regardless of its design. As the day progressed, Elena began to notice patterns in the data that hadn't been documented in any of the official reports. Certain atmospheric conditions seemed to enhance stealth, effectiveness beyond what the aircraft's design alone could achieve. It was as if the air itself was cooperating with the technology, creating pockets of invisibility that existed independent of the aircraft's physical characteristics. Elena spent the evening in her quarters, her mind racing with possibilities. The work she was doing went far beyond weather observation or even atmospheric research. She was helping to develop the scientific foundation for a new generation of stealth operations, missions that would rely as much on atmospheric conditions as on aircraft design. She pulled out her personal notebook, the one she had kept throughout her career, and began sketching ideas for atmospheric stealth models. The concepts were revolutionary, suggesting that proper understanding of weather patterns could make any aircraft significantly more difficult to detect. But implementing such ideas would require the kind of flight testing that only the most advanced programs could provide. Elena's thoughts turned to the invisible aircraft she had witnessed landing 2 days earlier. That aircraft had arrived during specific atmospheric conditions she now realized had been carefully selected to maximize its stealth effectiveness. The timing hadn't been coincidental. It had been planned by someone who understood exactly what she was now learning. The next morning, Elaine arrived at Building 4472 with renewed enthusiasm for her assignment. Dr. Mitchell was waiting with additional data files and a new directive that would expand Elena's responsibilities significantly. "Your preliminary analysis was impressive," Dr. Mitchell said, reviewing Elena's work from the previous day. "The patterns you identified in the Area 51 data match theoretical predictions we've been unable to verify. Command wants you to develop operational guidelines for atmospheric stealth techniques." Elena felt the weight of the assignment settling on her shoulders. Operational guidelines meant her work would directly influence actual mission planning. Pilots would rely on her atmospheric models to plan stealth operations, and any errors in her analysis could compromise both mission success and pilot safety. "Dr. Mitchell," Elena said, "developing operational guidelines would require validation through actual flight testing. How will we know if the models are accurate without testing them under real-world conditions?" Dr. Mitchell's expression became more serious, suggesting that Elena had asked exactly the right question. "That's where the next phase of your assignment comes in, Captain. You'll be working with a test pilot to validate your atmospheric models. Someone with extensive stealth experience who can evaluate the practical applications of your theoretical work." Elena felt her heart rate increase. Working with a test pilot meant potential access to actual stealth aircraft, the opportunity to see her atmospheric models tested under real conditions. It was the kind of assignment that could define her entire career. "When do I meet this test pilot?" Elena asked. Dr. Mitchell checked her tablet. "Tomorrow morning. The pilot will review your atmospheric models and determine which ones are suitable for flight testing. If your work meets their standards, you'll be involved in developing test protocols for a new generation of stealth operations." Elena spent the rest of the day refining her atmospheric models, ensuring that every calculation was precise and every prediction was supported by solid data. She knew that tomorrow's meeting would determine whether she remained in a support role or became an active participant in the most advanced aviation programs in the world. That evening, Elena sat in her quarters reviewing everything she had learned about atmospheric stealth. The science was revolutionary, but it was also untested. Her models suggested that proper understanding of weather patterns could make aircraft virtually undetectable. But theories meant nothing without practical validation. Elena pulled out a photograph. She kept hidden in her desk drawer a picture of her father in his Air Force uniform, taken shortly before his deployment to Vietnam. He had been a navigator on B-52 bombers, responsible for guiding aircraft through hostile airspace using instruments and calculations that seemed primitive compared to modern technology. Her father had never returned from his final mission, shot down over North Vietnam while trying to deliver supplies to isolated ground units. Elena had joined the Air Force partly to honor his memory, but also to ensure that future pilots would have better tools for survival in hostile environments. The atmospheric stealth techniques she was developing could provide exactly that kind of protection. Elena carefully returned the photograph to its hiding place and opened her notebook to a fresh page. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities, but tonight was for preparation. She began sketching atmospheric models that went beyond anything she had attempted before, theories that could revolutionize not just stealth operations, but the entire relationship between aircraft and the air through which they moved. The work was theoretical, but Elena approached it with the precision of someone who understood that theories would soon become operational realities. Somewhere in the classified hangars of Nellis Air Force Base, aircraft waited that could validate her models and prove that the air itself could be an ally in the mission of remaining invisible. Elena worked until well past midnight, refining calculations and developing new approaches to atmospheric analysis. She was no longer just a weather observer relegated to support roles. She was becoming an architect of invisibility, someone whose understanding of air and weather could determine the success or failure of the most critical missions in American military aviation. The transformation from overlooked meteorologist to essential team member was happening faster than she had dared to hope, but Elena understood that the real test was yet to come. Tomorrow she would meet the test pilot who would evaluate her work, and that meeting would determine whether her careful preparation had been sufficient to earn her a place in the world of operational stealth aviation. Elena arrived at building 4472 30 minutes before her scheduled meeting, her briefcase containing printed copies of every atmospheric model she had developed over the past week. The morning air was crisp, carrying the sharp scent of sage and the distant sound of aircraft engines warming up on the main flight line. Today would determine whether her theoretical work would translate into operational reality, and she had spent the night rehearsing explanations for concepts that pushed the boundaries of atmospheric science. Dr. Mitchell met her in the lobby with an expression that suggested today's meeting carried more weight than routine collaboration. Captain Rodriguez, your work has generated considerable interest at levels well above my clearance. The test pilot you're meeting today represents the most advanced stealth program in the Air Force. This isn't just an evaluation, it's a potential gateway to operations that don't appear on any organizational chart. Elena felt her stomach tighten with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. She had dedicated her career to reaching exactly this kind of opportunity, but the reality of standing at the threshold felt more daunting than she had anticipated. I understand, Dr. Mitchell. I'm prepared to explain my atmospheric models and their potential applications. Good, Dr. Mitchell replied, leading Elena toward a different section of the building. But remember, what you're about to see and hear is compartmentalized at the highest levels. The aircraft and operations will be discussing officially don't exist. Your security oath covers everything you experience today. They walked through corridors Elena hadn't seen before, passing laboratories where technicians worked with materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Through one partially open door, she glimpsed what appeared to be a wind tunnel, but its design was unlike anything in conventional aerospace engineering. The facility was larger and more sophisticated than she had realized, clearly supporting research programs that went far beyond atmospheric analysis. Dr. Mitchell stopped at a conference room door, marked with nothing more than a warning about authorized personnel only. Captain Rodriguez, meet Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, our senior test pilot for advanced stealth operations. Elena stepped into the conference room and found herself facing a man whose presence immediately commanded attention. Webb appeared to be in his early 40s, with graying temples and the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving missions others couldn't imagine. His flight suit bore no unit patches or identifying marks, only his name tape and the silver oak leaves of his rank. "Captain Rodriguez," Webb said, standing to shake her hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive, and his eyes held the steady focus of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly and accurately. "Dr. Mitchell tells me you've developed some interesting theories about atmospheric stealth. I'm here to determine whether those theories have practical application." Elena opened her briefcase and removed a thick folder containing her atmospheric models. "Sir, I've analyzed the relationship between weather patterns and stealth effectiveness, and I believe I've identified atmospheric conditions that could significantly enhance an aircraft's ability to remain undetected." Webb gestured for her to take a seat at the conference table, then activated a large display screen that dominated one wall of the room. "Show me what you've found, Captain. But understand that I've been flying stealth aircraft for 15 years. And I've heard a lot of theories that don't survive contact with operational reality." Elena connected her laptop to the display system and began presenting her first atmospheric model. The screen is filled with a three-dimensional representation of atmospheric layers, color-coded to show temperature, humidity, and pressure variations. This model shows how specific atmospheric conditions can create what I call stealth corridors, areas where electromagnetic and thermal signatures are naturally suppressed. Webb leaned forward, his attention focused on the display. "Explain what you mean by naturally suppressed." "Temperature inversions can trap electromagnetic energy, preventing it from reaching detection systems," Elena explained, highlighting sections of the model. "Humidity variations affect how radar waves propagate through the atmosphere. High-pressure zones can compress air in ways that reduce acoustic signatures. When these conditions align, they create pockets of space where any aircraft becomes significantly harder to detect." Webb studied the display for several minutes, asking technical questions that revealed his deep understanding of both atmospheric physics and stealth technology. Elena answered each question with growing confidence, realizing that her theoretical work was meeting the scrutiny of someone who had experienced the operational challenges she was trying to solve. "Interesting," Webb said finally. "Your model suggests that stealth effectiveness isn't just about aircraft design. It's about choosing the right atmospheric conditions for each mission. That would represent a fundamental shift in how we plan operations." Elena activated her next model, showing historical weather data correlated with detection ranges for various aircraft. This analysis of Area 51 test flights shows exactly that pattern. On days when atmospheric conditions match my stealth corridor parameters, detection ranges drop by an average of 40%. Webb's expression shifted from professional interest to something approaching excitement. 40%? That's not incremental improvement, that's revolutionary. You're suggesting that we could make existing stealth aircraft even more effective just by choosing when and where to fly them? Exactly, sir. But the implications go beyond scheduling. If we understand atmospheric stealth well enough, we could potentially make any aircraft harder to detect, regardless of its design. The atmosphere becomes part of the stealth system. Elena presented her most ambitious model, a predictive system that could identify optimal atmospheric conditions for stealth operations up to 72 hours in advance. The model incorporated satellite data, ground-based sensors, and advanced atmospheric physics to create what amounted to a stealth weather forecast. Webb stood and began pacing around the conference table, his mind clearly working through the operational implications of Elena's research. "Captain, what you're proposing would require validation through actual flight testing. Are you prepared to participate in that kind of evaluation?" Elena felt her pulse quicken. Participation in flight testing meant more than just theoretical work. It meant involvement in actual stealth operations. "Yes, sir. I understand that theoretical models need practical validation." "Good," Webb replied. Because I'm about to show you something that will change your understanding of what's possible in military aviation. Webb activated a different display system, and the conference room windows automatically darkened to create complete privacy. The screen filled with an image that made Elena's breath catch in her throat, a photograph of an aircraft unlike anything she had ever seen. It was enormous, easily the size of a commercial airliner, but its design was purely angular, composed of flat surfaces and sharp edges that seemed to defy conventional aerodynamics. "This is the B-21 Raider," Webb said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute secrecy. "The most advanced stealth bomber ever built. It's capable of penetrating any air defense system in the world, but only when atmospheric conditions are optimal. Your research could make it even more effective." Elena stared at the image, her mind racing to process the implications. The aircraft represented technology beyond anything she had imagined, but it also validated everything her atmospheric models had suggested. Stealth operations required perfect coordination between advanced aircraft design and optimal atmospheric conditions. "Sir," Elena said carefully, "how would my atmospheric models be integrated into operational planning for an aircraft like this?" Webb smiled for the first time since their meeting began. "That's exactly the question we need to answer, Captain. The B-21 program is entering its final testing phase, and we need someone who understands atmospheric stealth to help develop operational protocols. Someone who can predict optimal conditions for missions that absolutely cannot fail." Elena felt the magnitude of what was being offered settling on her shoulders. She was being asked to join the most classified program in the Air Force to help plan missions that would likely determine the outcome of future conflicts. It was the opportunity she had dreamed of, but it also represented responsibilities that could affect national security. "There's something else," Webb continued, activating another display. "The B-21 isn't just a bomber, it's a platform that can be configured for multiple mission types. Intelligence gathering, electronic warfare, even space operations. Each mission profile requires different atmospheric considerations." The new display showed mission profiles that pushed the boundaries of what Elena had thought possible. Flights to the edge of space, operations in polar regions where atmospheric conditions were radically different, and missions that would require the aircraft to remain undetected for hours at a time while deep in hostile territory. "Your atmospheric models would need to account for all of these variables," Webb explained. "Temperature extremes, pressure variations, electromagnetic interference from natural and artificial sources. It's the most complex atmospheric analysis challenge in military history." Elena studied the mission profiles, her mind automatically beginning to process the atmospheric requirements for each one. The work would be extraordinarily challenging, requiring her to develop new models and techniques that went far beyond anything she had attempted before. "Sir, I accept the challenge," Elena said. "When would testing begin?" Webb checked his watch. "This afternoon, if you're ready. We have a B-21 scheduled for atmospheric evaluation flights, and we need someone who can monitor conditions in real time and provide guidance to the pilot. Are you prepared for that level of responsibility?" Elena felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with apprehension. Real-time atmospheric guidance for the most advanced aircraft in the world represented the ultimate test of her theories and capabilities. There would be no room for error, no opportunity to revise calculations or reconsider recommendations. "I'm ready, sir," Webb nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Dr. Mitchell will escort you to the Flight Operations Center. You'll have access to atmospheric monitoring equipment that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, and you'll be in direct communication with the test pilot throughout the flight." Elena gathered her materials, her mind racing with questions about the equipment she would be using and the protocol she would need to follow. This was the moment she had been preparing for throughout her career, but the reality of it was more intense than she had anticipated. "Captain Rodriguez," Webb said as she prepared to leave, "you should know that what happens this afternoon will determine not just your future with this program, but potentially your entire career. The B-21 program doesn't accept anything less than perfection, and neither do the missions it's designed to support." Elena met his gaze steadily. "I understand, sir. I won't let you down." As Elena left the conference room, she felt the weight of extraordinary opportunity balanced against the possibility of catastrophic failure. Her atmospheric models were about to be tested under the most demanding conditions possible, and the results would determine whether she remained on the periphery of military aviation or stepped into its most classified center, the transformation. From weather observer to potential B-21 mission planner was happening faster than she had dared hope. But Elena understood that the real test was just beginning. This afternoon, her theoretical work would meet operational reality, and that collision would determine whether she had truly found her place in the world of advanced stealth aviation. The Flight Operations Center for the B-21 program occupied an underground facility that Elena accessed through an elevator requiring 3 separate security verifications. The descent took longer than she expected, carrying her deep beneath the Nevada desert to a level where the sound of surface operations faded to absolute silence. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world that redefined her understanding of military aviation capabilities. The operations center resembled a combination of NASA, mission control, and a high-tech war room. Dozens of workstations lined the main floor, each equipped with multiple displays showing real-time atmospheric data from monitoring stations across the western United States. Overhead displays presented weather patterns, satellite imagery, and what appeared to be 3-dimensional models of atmospheric conditions, extending from ground level to the edge of space. Dr. Mitchell led Elena to a workstation that had been configured specifically for atmospheric analysis. The computer systems were more advanced than anything she had encountered, with processing power that could model atmospheric conditions with extraordinary precision. But what captured her attention was the central display showing a detailed map of the test range with a single icon representing the B-21 currently preparing for flight. "Captain Rodriguez," a voice said from behind her. Elena turned to see a woman in a flight suit approaching someone she hadn't been introduced to but who clearly belonged in this environment. "I'm Major Jennifer Carson, your liaison with the B-21 flight crew. I'll be coordinating between your atmospheric analysis and the pilot's operational requirements." Elena shook Carson's hand, noting the confidence in her grip and the directness of her gaze. "Major Carson, what specific atmospheric parameters will the pilot need during today's test flight?" "That depends on what your models recommend," Carson replied. "Today's mission is designed to validate your stealth corridor theories under actual flight conditions. The pilot will be Colonel Webb, and he'll be relying on your real-time atmospheric guidance to optimize the aircraft's stealth performance." Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical presence. Colonel Webb would be flying the most advanced aircraft in the world based on her atmospheric recommendations, and any errors in her analysis could compromise both the mission and his safety. Elena began familiarizing herself with the workstation's capabilities, discovering that she had access to atmospheric data from sources she hadn't known existed. Satellite-based sensors provided temperature and humidity readings with extraordinary precision, while ground-based monitoring stations offered real-time measurements of electromagnetic propagation and acoustic conditions. The central display updated every few seconds, showing the B-21's position as it was towed from its classified hangar to the runway. Elena watched the aircraft's progress with growing anticipation, knowing that this would be her first opportunity to see the bomber in actual operation rather than just photographs. Atmospheric stations report optimal conditions in grid sectors 7 through 12, announced a technician at a nearby workstation. Temperature inversion layer is holding steady at 15,000 feet, with humidity differential matching predicted parameters. Elena activated her own atmospheric model and began comparing the real-time data with her theoretical predictions. The correlation was remarkable. Conditions were developing exactly as her models had suggested they would, creating a stealth corridor that extended from ground level to nearly 20,000 feet. Colonel Webb, this is atmospheric control. Elena heard through her headset as communications began between the operations center and the aircraft. We show optimal stealth conditions developing across your planned flight path. Temperature inversion is stable and humidity patterns are favorable. Webb's voice responded with the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to flying aircraft that officially didn't exist. Copy, atmospheric control. Beginning engine start sequence. Request continuous updates on corridor stability. Elena adjusted her displays to show atmospheric conditions along Webb's planned route. Her models indicated that the stealth corridor would remain stable for at least 90 minutes, providing an extended window for testing various flight profiles and stealth configurations. Major Carson, Elena said, my analysis shows we'll have optimal conditions for the next hour and a half. The atmospheric layers are aligning to create maximum electromagnetic absorption and thermal masking. Carson nodded and relayed the information to Webb. Colonel, atmospheric control confirms extended optimal window. You're cleared for full test profile execution. Elena watched her displays as the B-21 began its taxi to the runway. Even with all her preparation and theoretical understanding, seeing the aircraft move across the ground was an extraordinary experience. Its angular surfaces seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and its movement was surprisingly quiet for something so large. Atmospheric control. This is Phantom 77 requesting stealth corridor verification for takeoff. Webb announced, using what Elena assumed was the B-21's classified call sign. Elena checked her real-time atmospheric model and confirmed that conditions at ground level were optimal for minimizing the aircraft's signature during its most vulnerable phase of flight. Phantom 77, stealth corridor is confirmed stable. Electromagnetic absorption is at maximum efficiency. Thermal masking is optimal. Copy, atmospheric control. Phantom 77 is airborne. Elena watched the displays as the B-21 lifted off, its ascent so smooth and quiet that it seemed to simply fade into the sky rather than climb through it. Her atmospheric sensors tracked the aircraft's progress as it entered the stealth corridor she had predicted, and the results exceeded even her most optimistic projections. Major Carson, Elena said, studying the data streaming across her screens. The aircraft's signature is dropping faster than my models predicted. The stealth corridor is more effective than I calculated. Carson leaned over Elena's shoulder to study the displays. How much more effective? Elena ran rapid calculations on her secondary monitor. At least 20% better than predicted. The atmospheric conditions aren't just masking the aircraft's signature, they're actively suppressing it in ways I didn't anticipate. This was more than validation of her theories, it was the discovery of atmospheric effects that went beyond her current understanding. The B-21 wasn't just benefiting from optimal weather conditions. It was somehow interacting with the atmosphere in ways that enhanced its stealth capabilities beyond what either the aircraft design or atmospheric conditions could achieve independently. Colonel Webb, Elena announced over the communications channel, you're experiencing enhanced stealth effectiveness beyond predicted parameters. Whatever you're doing up there is working better than our models suggested. Webb's response carried a note of satisfaction. Copy, atmospheric control. Aircraft systems are showing signature levels well below baseline. Requesting guidance for extended stealth profile testing. Elena consulted her atmospheric models and identified a flight path that would keep the B-21 within optimal conditions for maximum testing duration. Phantom 77, recommend heading 270, altitude 18,000 feet. That will keep you in the stealth corridor for another 60 minutes. Copy, heading 270, climbing to 18,000. Elena watched the aircraft's icon move across her display, tracking its progress through the atmospheric conditions she had mapped. Every few minutes, she provided updates on corridor stability and recommended minor course adjustments to maintain optimal stealth effectiveness. Atmospheric control, Webb announced 30 minutes into the flight. I'm going to test the aircraft's performance at the edge of your predicted corridor. I want to see how quickly stealth effectiveness degrades when we leave optimal conditions. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Testing at the edge of the stealth corridor meant deliberately moving into atmospheric conditions that would make the aircraft more detectable. It was exactly the kind of data needed to validate her models, but it also increased the risk of exposing the B-21 to potential detection. Phantom 77, understand your testing corridor boundaries. I show degraded conditions beginning at bearing 090 from your current position. Electromagnetic masking will decrease progressively as you move in that direction. Copy, atmospheric control. Beginning boundary test now. Elena watched her displays as the B-21 moved toward the edge of optimal atmospheric conditions. The aircraft's signature began to increase as predicted, but the rate of change provided valuable data about how atmospheric conditions affected stealth performance. Her models were proving accurate, but the real-world testing was revealing subtleties that no theoretical analysis could capture. Atmospheric control signature increase is tracking your predictions exactly, Webb reported. Moving back into the optimal corridor now. Elena guided Webb back into the stealth corridor, watching as the aircraft's signature dropped to virtually undetectable levels. The test had validated her atmospheric models while providing data that would allow her to refine them for even better accuracy. Major Carson, Elena said, I'm seeing atmospheric effects that aren't in any literature I've studied. The interaction between the B-21's design and optimal atmospheric conditions is creating synergistic self-enhancement. Carson activated a recording system to capture Elena's observations. Explain what you mean by synergistic enhancement. Elena pointed to her displays showing the aircraft's signature levels. The B-21 stealth technology is designed to interact with atmospheric conditions in specific ways. When atmospheric parameters are optimal, the aircraft doesn't just become harder to detect, it becomes virtually invisible to multiple detection methods simultaneously. This was the breakthrough Elena had been seeking throughout her career, the discovery that atmospheric conditions could be actively used to enhance aircraft stealth rather than simply accommodated as environmental factors. The implications were revolutionary, suggesting that proper atmospheric analysis could make any stealth aircraft significantly more effective. Phantom 77, Elena announced. I'm tracking atmospheric changes that will create an enhanced stealth corridor in Grid Sector 15. Recommend heading 310 for maximum signature suppression. Webb adjusted course based on Elena's guidance, and the results were immediate. The B-21 signature dropped to levels that pushed the limits of the monitoring equipment's ability to track it. Elena found herself guiding an aircraft that was approaching true invisibility, not just to radar or infrared detection, but to virtually every sensing method in existence. Atmospheric control, Webb announced with obvious satisfaction. I'm showing signature levels that are approaching theoretical minimums. Whatever atmospheric magic you're working down there, keep it up. Elena smiled at the description of her work as atmospheric magic, knowing that it was actually the application of rigorous science to optimize conditions that most people didn't even know could be controlled. She was demonstrating that the atmosphere itself could be used as a tool for stealth operations. For the next 40 minutes, Elena provided continuous atmospheric guidance that kept the B-21 operating at peak stealth effectiveness. She identified thermal gradients that enhanced infrared masking, electromagnetic conditions that minimized radar signature, and acoustic environments that reduced engine noise propagation. Phantom 77. This is atmospheric control with final corridor recommendation, Elena announced as the test flight neared its conclusion. Optimal approach conditions are developing on runway heading. Temperature inversion and humidity. Patterns are aligned for maximum signature suppression during landing. Webb acknowledged the guidance and began his approach, following Elena's atmospheric recommendations to maintain stealth effectiveness even during the aircraft's most vulnerable phase of flight. Elena tracked the landing approach on her displays, providing last-minute updates to ensure optimal conditions throughout the descent. Phantom 77 is on the ground, Webb announced. Atmospheric control, that was exceptional work. The stealth effectiveness we achieved today exceeded every prediction. Elena felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. She had successfully provided real-time atmospheric guidance for the most advanced aircraft in the world, and the results had validated her theories while revealing new possibilities for atmospheric stealth enhancement. Major Carson approached Elena's workstation with an expression of professional respect. Captain Rodriguez, what you accomplished today represents a fundamental advancement in stealth operations. Command is going to want a full briefing on your atmospheric analysis techniques. Elena began documenting her observations from the test flight, knowing that her work would form the foundation for new operational protocols that could revolutionize military aviation. She had moved beyond theoretical atmospheric research to practical application of atmospheric stealth in real-world conditions. The test flight had proven that Elena's atmospheric models were not just accurate, they were revolutionary. She had demonstrated that the atmosphere could be used as an active component of stealth technology, opening possibilities for making any aircraft more effective through proper understanding of weather conditions. As Elena completed her post-flight analysis, she realized that her career had fundamentally changed. She was no longer a weather observer relegated to support roles. She had become an architect of atmospheric stealth, someone whose understanding of air and weather could determine the success of the most critical missions in American military aviation. The emergency briefing convened at 0530 hours in a conference room Elena had never seen before, located 3 levels deeper than the operations center where she had guided the successful B-21 test flight. The urgency in Dr. Mitchell's voice when she had called Elena at 0500 suggested something significant had developed overnight, something that required immediate attention from everyone involved in the atmospheric stealth program. Elena arrived to find the room already occupied by personnel. She didn't recognize officers whose uniforms bore no unit designations and civilians whose security badges showed clearance levels beyond anything she had previously encountered. Colonel Webb sat at the head of the conference table, his expression more serious than she had seen during their previous interactions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Webb began without preamble, "we have a situation that requires immediate application of the atmospheric stealth capabilities we validated yesterday. Captain Rodriguez, your atmospheric analysis techniques are needed for an operational mission that launches in 18 hours. Elena felt her stomach drop. 18 hours meant no time for preparation, no opportunity to refine her models or conduct additional testing. Whatever mission was being planned would rely entirely on the atmospheric techniques she had developed and demonstrated during the previous day's test flight. Dr. Mitchell activated the room's main display, showing a map of Eastern Europe with several areas highlighted in red. Intelligence sources have identified a time-critical target that requires immediate reconnaissance. The target is protected by the most advanced air defense systems in the world, and conventional stealth approaches have been compromised. Elena studied the map, noting the density of surface-to-air missile sites and radar installations surrounding the highlighted areas. Penetrating such defenses would require perfect coordination between aircraft capabilities and atmospheric conditions, with no margin for error. Captain Rodriguez, said a man Elena didn't recognize, his civilian clothes and confident bearing suggesting high-level intelligence oversight. Your atmospheric stealth techniques represent the only viable approach for this mission. We need you to identify optimal atmospheric conditions over the target area and develop a flight plan that maintains maximum stealth effectiveness. Elena opened her laptop and began accessing weather data for the target region. Sir, what's the mission? Timeline? I'll need to analyze atmospheric patterns and predict optimal windows for stealth operations. The mission launches at 2,300 hours tonight, Webb replied. Flight time to target is approximately 8 hours, which means we need atmospheric predictions. That extend 14 hours into the future. Can your models provide that kind of accuracy? Elena felt the weight of the challenge settling on her shoulders. Predicting atmospheric conditions with the precision required for stealth operations was difficult enough for familiar regions like Nevada. Doing so for a foreign location on such short notice would push her analytical capabilities to their absolute limits. I can provide atmospheric predictions with reasonable accuracy, Elena said carefully, but I'll need access to weather data from monitoring stations in the target region. Do we have that kind of intelligence coverage? The unidentified civilian nodded toward Dr. Mitchell, who began entering commands into her tablet. We have access to atmospheric data from multiple sources, including some that aren't officially acknowledged. You'll have everything you need to develop optimal stealth. Corridors. Elena spent the next hour analyzing weather patterns over Eastern Europe, developing atmospheric models that incorporated local terrain features, seasonal weather patterns, and predicted temperature and humidity variations. The work was extraordinarily complex, requiring her to account for atmospheric conditions she had never experienced firsthand. I'm seeing a potential stealth corridor developing over the target area between 0800 and 1100 hours local time, Elena announced, highlighting sections of her atmospheric model. Temperature inversion layers and humidity patterns will create optimal conditions for electromagnetic masking and thermal suppression. Webb leaned forward to study Elena's display. What's the margin for error? If atmospheric conditions change unexpectedly, how much variation can the mission tolerate? Elena ran sensitivity analyses on her atmospheric models, testing how variations in temperature, humidity, and pressure would affect stealth effectiveness. The stealth corridor should remain stable within acceptable parameters, but I recommend continuous atmospheric monitoring throughout the flight. Real-time updates will be essential for maintaining optimal conditions. That won't be possible, the civilian said quietly. This mission requires complete communication silence once the aircraft enters hostile airspace. The pilot will be relying entirely on your pre-mission atmospheric analysis. Elena felt a chill of apprehension. Providing real-time atmospheric guidance during the previous day's test flight had been challenging enough. Creating a mission plan that would maintain stealth effectiveness without any ability to make adjustments represented an entirely different level of responsibility. Sir, Elena said, I can provide atmospheric predictions and optimal flight planning, but operating without real-time updates significantly increases the mission's risk profile. Atmospheric conditions can change rapidly, especially in regions with complex terrain. Webb's expression suggested he understood the implications better than anyone else in the room. Captain Rodriguez, this mission cannot fail. The intelligence we're seeking is time-critical and cannot be obtained through any other means. Your atmospheric analysis represents the difference between mission success and potential loss of the most advanced aircraft in our inventory. Elena spent the next 6 hours developing the most comprehensive atmospheric analysis of her career. She created detailed models of atmospheric conditions over the target area, identified multiple stealth corridors that would provide redundancy if primary conditions changed, and developed contingency plans for various weather scenarios, Her work went far beyond traditional meteorology, incorporating electromagnetic propagation analysis, thermal signature modeling, and acoustic suppression calculations. She was essentially creating a three-dimensional map of atmospheric invisibility that would guide the B-21 through one of the most dangerous airspace environments in the world. "Dr. Mitchell," Alina said as she completed her atmospheric analysis, "I need to understand the aircraft's specific mission profile. Different phases of the operation will require different atmospheric considerations." Dr. Mitchell consulted her classified briefing materials. The mission involves 3 phases: ingress to the target area, extended loitering for intelligence collection, and egress. Each phase will place different demands on stealth effectiveness. Alina modified her atmospheric models to account for the mission's requirements. The ingress phase would require maximum electromagnetic stealth to avoid detection by long-range radar systems. The loitering phase would need optimal thermal masking to avoid infrared detection during extended exposure. The egress phase would require acoustic suppression to minimize detection during the most vulnerable part of the mission. "I've identified atmospheric windows that will optimize stealth effectiveness for each mission phase," Alina announced, presenting her final analysis. The ingress corridor provides maximum electromagnetic masking. The target area will have optimal thermal suppression during the intelligence collection window, and egress conditions will minimize acoustic signature. Colonel Webb studied Alina's atmospheric analysis with the focused attention of someone whose life would depend on its accuracy. "Captain Rodriguez, this is exceptional work. You've created an atmospheric mission plan that accounts for every phase of a complex operation." The briefing continued for another 2 hours as Alina explained her atmospheric models to the mission planners and intelligence analysts who would be monitoring the operation from various classified facilities. Her analysis became the foundation for detailed mission planning that would coordinate aircraft capabilities with optimal atmospheric conditions. As the afternoon progressed, Alina found herself at the center of mission planning for one of the most critical intelligence operations in recent history. Her atmospheric analysis was being integrated into flight planning, communication protocols, and contingency procedures that would guide the B-21 through hostile airspace to a target of extraordinary importance. "Captain Rodriguez," the civilian said as the briefing concluded, "your atmospheric stealth techniques have made this mission possible. Without your ability to identify optimal atmospheric conditions, we couldn't risk exposing our most advanced aircraft to such sophisticated defenses." Alina felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a physical presence. Her atmospheric analysis would determine whether the mission succeeded or failed, whether critical intelligence was obtained or lost, and whether the B-21 returned safely or was compromised in hostile territory. "Colonel," Webb approached Alina as the other personnel filed out of the conference room. "Captain, I want you to know that this mission represents validation of everything you've worked toward. Your atmospheric stealth techniques aren't just theoretical anymore, they're operational capabilities that can determine the outcome of critical national security missions." Alina nodded, understanding that her career had reached a pivotal moment. Success would establish her as an essential component of the most advanced military operations in the world. Failure could end not just her career, but potentially compromise American intelligence capabilities for years to come. "Sir," Alina said, "I've done everything possible to ensure mission success through optimal atmospheric analysis. The stealth corridors I've identified should provide maximum protection throughout the operation." Webb's expression carried both confidence and concern. "I trust your analysis, Captain. You've demonstrated capabilities that go beyond anything we've seen before. Tonight's mission will prove whether atmospheric stealth can be applied to operational realities." Alina spent the evening in her quarters, reviewing her atmospheric analysis one final time and checking for any factors she might have overlooked. The mission plan was as comprehensive as she could make it, but she understood that no amount of preparation could account for every possible variable in such a complex operation. At 2,200 hours, Elena received a secure communication directing her to the Underground Operations Center for mission monitoring. While she couldn't provide real-time atmospheric guidance, she would be tracking weather conditions throughout the flight and documenting any variations that might affect future operations. Elena arrived at the Operations Center to find it configured for monitoring a mission that officially didn't exist. Multiple displays showed atmospheric conditions over the target area, aircraft tracking systems that could follow the B-21's progress, and communication equipment that would maintain contact with various intelligence agencies monitoring the operation. "Captain Rodriguez," Major Carson announced, "Colonel Webb is airborne and proceeding to the target area. Your atmospheric analysis is being validated in real time as he follows the stealth corridors you identified." Elena watched the displays showing atmospheric conditions over Eastern Europe, comparing real-time data with her pre-mission predictions. The correlation was remarkable. Conditions were developing exactly as her models had suggested, creating the stealth corridors that would protect the B-21 throughout its mission. Atmospheric conditions are tracking predictions within acceptable parameters, Elena announced to the Operations Center. The stealth corridors are stable and should provide optimal protection throughout the mission timeline. For the next 8 hours, Elena monitored atmospheric conditions while the B-21 flew its mission deep in hostile territory. She tracked temperature inversions, humidity variations, and electromagnetic propagation characteristics that would determine whether the aircraft remained undetected. The mission proceeded exactly as planned, with the B-21 following Elena's atmospheric analysis to maintain maximum stealth effectiveness throughout the operation. Her atmospheric stealth techniques were being validated under the most demanding conditions possible, proving that her theoretical work could be successfully applied to operational realities. When Colonel Webb finally announced mission completion and began his return to base, Elena felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with exhaustion. Her atmospheric analysis had guided one of the most critical intelligence missions in recent history, and the success proved that atmospheric stealth was no longer theoretical. It was an operational capability that could determine the outcome of national security missions. Elena's transformation from overlooked weather observer to essential mission planner was complete. She had proven that atmospheric conditions could be actively used to enhance stealth operations, and her techniques would become standard procedures for the most advanced military aviation programs in the world. 6 months after the successful intelligence mission over Eastern Europe, Elena stood before a panel of the highest-ranking officers in the United States Air Force. The Pentagon briefing room was configured for presentations involving the most classified programs in American military aviation, its walls lined with displays showing global threat assessments and strategic capability analyses that would determine the future of air power for decades to come. General Patricia Hayes, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, occupied the center chair at the review panel. Her presence indicated that Elena's atmospheric stealth program had gained attention at the highest levels of military leadership. To her left sat General Michael Torres, Commander of Air Force Global Strike Command, responsible for the strategic bomber fleet that included the B-21 Raider. To her right, General Susan Chun, no relation to Colonel Chun from Nellis, oversaw Air Force research and development, making her the ultimate authority on innovative military technologies. Captain Rodriguez, General Hayes began, consulting. The briefing materials spread before her. Your atmospheric stealth techniques have fundamentally changed how we approach penetrating denied airspace. The mission you supported 6 months ago was just the beginning. We're here to discuss the future of your program and its implications for American air superiority. Elena had prepared for this moment throughout her career, but the reality of briefing the Air Force's senior leadership about revolutionary atmospheric techniques felt surreal. Her transformation from weather observer to strategic innovator was about to be formalized through decisions that would affect national defense policy. "Thank you, General Hayes," Elena replied, activating the presentation system. The atmospheric stealth program has proven that weather conditions can be actively used to enhance aircraft invisibility beyond what design alone can achieve. We've successfully demonstrated these techniques in both controlled testing and operational environments. The main display showed a global map highlighting regions where atmospheric stealth techniques had been successfully applied. Elena had spent the past 6 months expanding her analysis beyond the Nevada desert and Eastern Europe, developing atmospheric models that could optimize stealth operations anywhere in the world. "General Torres," Elena continued, "your B-21 fleet can achieve stealth effectiveness levels that exceed original design specifications by coordinating flight operations with optimal atmospheric conditions. We've identified atmospheric windows that can reduce detection ranges by up to 60% beyond baseline stealth capabilities." General Torres leaned forward with obvious interest. "Captain, explain how this 60% improvement translates to operational advantages. What does enhanced stealth effectiveness mean for our ability to operate in contested environments?" Elena activated a detailed analysis showing how atmospheric stealth affected mission planning and strategic capabilities. "Sir, enhanced stealth effectiveness means we can operate in airspace that was previously considered too dangerous. Air defense systems that could detect our aircraft under normal conditions become ineffective when atmospheric conditions are optimized." The implications were revolutionary. American strategic bombers could penetrate any air defense system in the world by coordinating their operations with atmospheric conditions that Elena's team could predict and optimize. The atmospheric stealth program had effectively made existing enemy defenses obsolete. "General Chun," Elena said, addressing the research and development commander, "we've also discovered that atmospheric stealth principles can be applied to aircraft that weren't originally designed for stealth operations. Conventional fighters and transport aircraft can achieve significant signature reduction through proper atmospheric planning." General Chun activated her tablet to review supporting data. "Captain Rodriguez, what you're describing sounds like a force multiplier that could affect our entire aviation fleet. Are you suggesting that any aircraft can benefit from atmospheric stealth techniques?" Elena displayed comparative analyses showing stealth improvements across different aircraft types. "Yes, ma'am. While purpose-built stealth aircraft like the B-21 show the greatest improvement, even conventional platforms can achieve 30 to 40% signature reduction under optimal atmospheric conditions. The principles scale across our entire fleet." The briefing continued for 2 hours as Elena presented the comprehensive results of her atmospheric stealth research. She demonstrated global applications, showed cost-benefit analyses for implementing atmospheric planning across all air operations, and outlined training programs that would teach pilots to use atmospheric conditions as actively as they used their aircraft systems. "Captain Rodriguez," General Hayes said as the presentation concluded, "your work represents the most significant advancement in stealth technology since the development of radar-absorbing materials. The atmospheric stealth program will become a cornerstone of American air operations." Elena felt the magnitude of what was being offered settling on her shoulders. The atmospheric stealth program would be expanded into a major research and development initiative, with Elena leading a team of scientists and engineers who would refine and implement her techniques across the entire Air Force. General Hayes. Elena replied, "I'm honored to lead this program. We've proven that the atmosphere itself can be used as a strategic asset, and I believe we've only begun to explore its potential applications." General Torres stood and approached the presentation screen, studying Elena's global atmospheric analyses. Captain, we're not just talking about research anymore. We're talking about operational implementation across our strategic bomber fleet, fighter squadrons, and special operations aircraft. This is a fundamental shift in how we approach air operations. Elena understood that her work had transcended scientific research to become strategic policy. Atmospheric stealth would be integrated into mission planning for every critical air operation, with her techniques becoming standard procedures for pilots operating in contested environments. "There's something else," General Chun said, consulting classified briefing materials. "The success of your atmospheric stealth program has attracted attention from our allies. NATO countries want to implement these techniques for their own air forces. We're looking at international cooperation on a scale comparable to the development of stealth aircraft themselves." Elena felt a surge of pride mixed with apprehension. International implementation of atmospheric stealth would multiply its strategic impact, but also increase the complexity of managing such an advanced program. She would be responsible not just for American air operations, but for allied capabilities. That could determine the outcome of future conflicts. "Captain Rodriguez," General Hayes announced, "effective immediately. You're being promoted to Major and assigned as Director of Atmospheric Operations Research. You'll be moving to the Pentagon to oversee implementation of atmospheric stealth across all Air Force operations." Elena felt the weight of extraordinary opportunity balanced against unprecedented responsibility. Her transformation from overlooked weather observer to Pentagon Program Director represented a journey that had redefined both her career and the future of military aviation. "Thank you, General Hayes," Elena replied. "I accept the assignment and the responsibility that comes with it." The briefing concluded with discussions of budget allocations, personnel assignments, and implementation timelines that would affect air operations for decades to come. Elena's atmospheric stealth program was being elevated from experimental research to operational doctrine, with implications that extended far beyond anything she had imagined when she first began analyzing weather patterns at Nellis. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in her new office at the Pentagon, surrounded by boxes containing research materials that would form the foundation of the most advanced atmospheric research program in military history. Her window faced the Potomac River, but her attention was focused on the global map that covered one wall of her office, marked with atmospheric monitoring stations and research facilities that would support worldwide implementation of stealth techniques. Dr. Mitchell had been transferred to Washington to serve as Elena's deputy director, bringing the expertise and institutional knowledge that would be essential for expanding the program. Major Carson had accepted assignment as Chief of Operations, responsible for coordinating between research activities and operational requirements across the Air Force. "Major Rodriguez," Dr. Mitchell said, entering the office with the morning's briefing materials, "we have requests from 12 different commands for atmospheric stealth analysis. Fighter squadrons, transport wings, special operations units. Everyone wants to implement your techniques." Elena reviewed the requests, noting the diversity of applications for atmospheric stealth. Fighter pilots wanted atmospheric guidance for air-to-air combat. Transport crews needed stealth techniques for operating in denied airspace, and special operations required atmospheric planning for covert insertion missions. "Dr. Mitchell," Elena said, "we need to prioritize based on strategic impact and operational urgency. Start with the programs that affect national security most directly, then expand to tactical applications." Elena spent the morning reviewing atmospheric data from monitoring stations around the world, identifying patterns that could be used to optimize stealth operations in different regions and climates. Her techniques were being refined and adapted for global application, creating a comprehensive system for using atmospheric conditions as strategic assets. The phone on Elena's desk rang, displaying a classified number she didn't recognize. "Major Rodriguez, this is Colonel Webb. I wanted to congratulate you on your promotion and thank you for revolutionizing how we approach stealth operations." Elena smiled at hearing from the pilot whose successful mission had validated her atmospheric techniques. "Thank you, Colonel Webb. How are the B-21 operations progressing with atmospheric integration?" "Beyond our most optimistic projections," Webb replied. "Every mission now includes atmospheric planning based on your techniques. We're operating in environments that were considered impossible just a year ago. Your atmospheric stealth program has changed everything." Elena understood that her work had achieved its ultimate validation operational success that enhanced American strategic capabilities while protecting the pilots who flew the most dangerous missions. Her atmospheric stealth techniques were no longer experimental. They were essential tools for maintaining air superiority in contested environments. That evening, Elena sat in her Pentagon office reviewing correspondence from atmospheric research programs around the world. Scientists and military planners from allied nations were requesting cooperation on developing their own atmospheric stealth capabilities, creating opportunities for international collaboration that could strengthen defensive capabilities across the free world. Elena opened her desk drawer and removed the photograph of her father in his Air Force uniform, the picture that had inspired her to join the military and develop capabilities that could protect future generations of pilots. His B-52 had been shot down over Vietnam because existing technology couldn't provide adequate protection in hostile airspace. Elena's atmospheric stealth program ensured that modern pilots would have tools her father never could have imagined. She placed the photograph on her desk where she could see it while working, a reminder of why her research mattered and what it could achieve. Elena had transformed from an overlooked weather observer to the architect of revolutionary capabilities that would protect American aircrews for decades to come. Elena's journey from dismissal to recognition had proven that innovation could come from unexpected sources, that persistence could overcome institutional bias, and that revolutionary capabilities could emerge from careful observation of phenomena that others ignored. Her atmospheric stealth program represented more than scientific advancement. It demonstrated that individual dedication and innovative thinking could change the course of military history. The phone rang again, displaying another classified number. Elena answered to hear General Hayes requesting a briefing on implementing atmospheric stealth for space operations, extending her techniques beyond atmospheric flight to orbital missions that would determine America's strategic capabilities. In the ultimate high ground, Elena smiled as she accepted the new challenge, understanding that her work would continue evolving to meet threats and opportunities that hadn't yet been imagined. She had proven that the sky was not a limit but a tool, and her atmospheric stealth techniques would continue protecting American interests wherever air power could reach. Her transformation was complete, but her mission was just beginning. Elena Rodriguez had become the guardian of invisible skies, ensuring that American aircraft could operate anywhere in the world while remaining unseen by those who would do them harm. The atmosphere itself had become America's strategic ally, and Elena was its voice in the corridors of power where the future of air superiority would be determined. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.